there were two decisions made. One was in Washington and one in Tokyo. It culminated in a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941. The reason I'm telling you this is because I happened to be on one of the ships that was sunk there, the USS Arizona. I'm Don Millikin. I was a seaman at the time, first class seaman. I was 21 years of age. The fact that I was there meant that I was in the Navy previous to the war starting. I didn't join the Navy to fight. I needed a job, like the most of us did. It ended up with a fight. And it all started right there. In 1939, when I joined the Navy, I went aboard the USS Vestal, which was a converted collier. It been converted into a repair ship, and they took us into Long Beach, and we were there. In 1940, we went to Hawaii. I was transferred from there to the sub base, and from the sub base to the Arizona. On the morning of the attack, it happened that the USS Vestal was alongside the Arizona. I didn't even know it. I was a mess cook. That's a fellow that cleans up the dishes and brings the food in. Didn't have anything to cook. Everybody did that, the smart ones. In any case, on this particular morning, we had cleaned up, had the dishes up and the tables up on the old Arizona where we were. In the 3rd Division, we just had tables and benches that came down off the ceiling, the overhead we call it. We had everything with funny names. And when we were finished, well, we stuck them back up and fastened them, and then we swung our hammocks from that. We had everything cleaned up, and it was customary in Hawaii, it was hot, why we all had our uniforms on while we served the food and cleaned up. When we were cleaning up, why we stripped down to our shorts, and that was it. Kept us cool. When I'd finished with this and the rest of them, I walked over to the porthole, stuck my head out to get a little fresh air. Saw a plane diving down out of the sky, and I thought it was one of ours. And another one was behind that. And I thought at the time that it was rather early for them to be practicing. But when he pulled out, something left him. It wasn't close enough for me to even see what plane it was. Then the hangar exploded, and I realized that we were being attacked. Well, the trouble was, I didn't even know the Japanese were attacking anybody. I thought they were still building little funny toys out of matchsticks and things. I thought it was the Germans. So I went to my battle station, which was down in the lower powder handling room. I ran by the quarterdeck. This is the place where the officer of the day is, messengers and all that. Everybody comes aboard there and leaves the ship there. And it was close to where I worked, which was the 3rd Division, was on the fantail, 4th Division too. And these two divisions were the only two that really got anybody off the ship to any degree, simply because we were not on fire and we weren't blown to smithereens. Well, the quarterdeck was on the opposite side of the ship this time because the side of the ship I was on was, the 3rd Division was tied up to the keys, so the boats all came in from the opposite side. As a result, the port side had the quarterdeck on it, but as I ran out to my battle station, when I was yelling to sound general quarters, nobody did, by the way. It was unlikely that anybody would. But anyway, going to my battle station saved my life, which has lasted now, and I'm 62, so I'm not doing too shabby. But I am getting old enough that I think that I probably should tell this story because somebody will be interested. In any case, the lower powder handling room is just that. It's way down in the bowels of the ship. We were the ones that put the powder on the elevators that went up to the big guns. We had turret number 3 that coincided with our division, 3rd Division. And the powders and the shells, why, they all came from down below and were elevated, and they were all jammed into the big guns, and then they were fired. When we got down there, there were 2 of us that made it down there. And the first thing you do when you get there, I wasn't a talker or a telephone man, but whoever got there first was to pick up the phones and make contact until the talker got there. So I was the first man down, and I tried to talk to somebody. No answer on the other end. On the way down, I noticed the bumping and banging of the ship. I thought that the rest of the guns were in action fighting back at whoever it was. It turned out that I was wrong, that it was their bombs and their torpedoes and the explosions of them hitting our ship and our magazines blowing up that I was feeling rather than us fighting back. Matter of fact, we never did fight back. Another man came down. We were the only 2 that ever made it down there. And we stayed down there for quite some time, never did get contact with anybody up in the gun captain station or any place else. And finally, a bomb landed close to where we were, and all the lights went out and everything. Smoke started coming in there with us, and so we battened down all the hatches and got out the battle lanterns, and there we was, trying to get everything ready to fight. But finally decided that we better find out where everybody else was. So we started up through the turret. Now this is a long ways, crawling up through there. Dark, many twists and turns, and we banged into a few things on the way up. But we finally made it to the top, he and I. Never met anybody in the turret except the 2 of us. And when we got to the top, there was a hole that went back to the back end of the turret, and you grabbed a bar and swung down from the little hatch that was underneath onto the deck, and I was in front. And this was Sunday morning, as you'll remember. And I was told later by this young fellow, and I don't remember his name, unfortunately. I don't even actually remember what he looked like. It's been quite a while. But he told me later, after we got over on the beach, that I had stuck my head out and looked around. The entire ship, almost, except where we were, was on fire and sunk. And he told me that I said, "This is a hell of a day to air bedding." Strangely enough, it was Sunday, and this was the day that we always took our bedding out and put it on the side of the ship and wherever we could to air it out. I haven't the foggiest notion why a thing like that would come to my mind, but he swore that that's what I said. Well, we swung down and there were a few people back there. They were coming out of holes, bomb holes, and whatnot. And there were two of the life rafts that was on turret number 4 were gone. I don't know, they must have taken those to the beach already. The two that was on our turret was still there. And we went over and cut one of them down and put it in the water. People jumped over the side until it was full, and they were all standing about knee-deep in the water. Well, I was in there too, pretty oily, and I got out of the water. It was only possibly a foot of ship above the water there at the time. Crawled back on the ship and went for the other life raft. There was a Filipino and a black mess attendant crawled out of a bomb hole at the same time and went over the railing, jumped in the water, and both swam ashore, not even waiting for that life raft. Well, we put the other life raft in, and the same thing happened to that. I came back aboard, and to the best of my recollection, there were about 5 or 6 of us left on the ship. I never did see anybody else. The reason I didn't go on the life raft is because if the wind had changed just slightly, why, the fire, the ship was totally on fire, and all around it would have engulfed me, and I figured that it was safer to stay where I was and head for the Tennessee, which was directly astern of us. It was quite a swim, but it didn't have any oil to amount to anything back there. So I and 4 or 5 others stayed on the ship, and we were waiting for a boat or something to come by. It was a holocaust all over the place. During the time we were on the ship, a couple of things happened that were of interest, I suppose. One of them was rather gruesome. On the port side of the ship, there was a doorway, same as the one that was on the starboard side, where you went from what was the main deck. The fantail back there was the main deck on the ship. It went all the way forward. And anything above that was superstructure, and below it was below decks. Well, thus, because of the fact that they had the quarterdeck back there, they always had Marines, 1 or 2 Marines back there guarding on whichever side of the ship that the quarterdeck was on, and it was on the port side that time. And they always had the gun rack just inside the door, about 5 feet in there so nobody would stumble over it. And a Marine come out of nowhere. I was standing in another boat looking around for a boat or anything to get to the beach. All of a sudden, here he was walking towards that door. His gun was in there, his rifle. And he very calmly walked into the door and into the fire, and we never saw him again. That's what training will do for you. It was quite impressive. It was gruesome, too. While we were waiting there, by the way, the war was over. For the most part, there was some shooting, but the big attack was over. They quit shooting us pretty much. There were still planes around, but they weren't really bothering us very much. Somebody had put up the colors. I don't know whether this was when they were doing colors that morning, but I don't think they ever finished it. But somebody had put up the flag back on the stern of the ship. It was up in any case, and one of the people that was back there with us declared that if we struck the flag, that is, pulled it down, that the Japanese would quit attacking us, that is, our ship. It was an idea that, just like any other stupid idea that comes into your head under circumstances like that, it's a crazy idea. So he went to pull the flag down. And the rest of us were just as crazy. We went over and fought him to keep him from doing it because we thought it was important that it stayed up. I can't see where it makes any difference one way or the other now, but at the time it seemed like it was a terribly important thing for us to keep it up there. As a matter of fact, one of the guys got knocked in the water during the little shoving match. But it was just another silly thing that happened to us. Then along came a captain's barge from nowhere and came and picked us up. And took us over to Fort Island. None of us were very well dressed. Most of us were in our underwear and all greasy and oily. And from over there and by an admiral's house, we watched the ship burn and the rest of the mess. Never did see anybody else come off of the ship. There were, according to what people tell me, I didn't know. I suppose somebody might have told me at one time while I was on the ship, but I didn't pay any attention to it, that there were 1,400 people on the ship. That 1,200 of them, roughly, were killed that day. How many of them actually got off of there? The 200 that were left, I don't know. But it was awful scarce. There have been a lot of things that have been said about this day that Washington knew, and this sort of thing, I don't know, probably did. But the thing that impressed me more about this was the shame of the fact that we were being trusted and paid to defend our ships and our nation. For the most part, didn't fire a shot in our own defense. Now I know that there wasn't the collusion that people seem to think there were, because a lot of the people, including some mighty able captains and admirals, died there. Certainly they didn't know. They wouldn't have volunteered to die, I don't think. I haven't run into anybody Japanese, but Japs would do that. None of us did. But die they did. Most of us that were left volunteered to go on destroyers, which was about the only thing that came back in there for a while. So we spent, at least I did, the rest of the war on a destroyer. A lot of people were killed from the group that got off there during the war. All of us had to be old because I was young when it happened. Some of the people that come over there I know are older than me. So I guess there's not very many of us left. Hence the reason I'm making this thing. I guess it's worthwhile to put it down. Somebody would probably really want to know what happened from somebody. So, I bid you farewell. Thanks for your attention. And for God's sake, don't let it happen again. Good night.
You did not tell